So this is in response to Steven Spielberg saying that he's going to do something about Netflix potentially winning Oscars. So I want to start off with my opinion on Steven Spielberg. I've always felt that he has very little substance in his movies, very little meaning. He's a very talented filmmaker, technically, but he's nothing in terms of he has no message. His movies have no profundity whatsoever. I fell asleep watching Saving Private Ryan. It bored me to death. Schindler's List, I don't remember any of it. I'm sure they were great movies, but whatever. It's kind of coincidental that they made no impact on me. He makes movies that nobody ever watches again, like E.T. and Jaws. Nobody will ever watch it again. They were a big deal at the time. And they were blockbusters, and they were watered down crap for the masses. It was airhead kind of movies. It was big budget movies, and they were the first of their kind, right? Jaws changed everything. It created the blockbuster. I saw a documentary about a month ago on Spielberg that confirmed everything I'd already thought, because I thought I was the only one who thought this. But no, they were saying that he gets a lot of criticism for making very empty movies, very empty, airheaded bullshit movies. So basically, and a few years ago, Spielberg and Lucas, because they're best friends, they came together and said that they think superhero movies are going to plateau and they're going to be gone in a few years because they're going to run out of steam and blah, blah, blah. And this came off to me as bitterness, because they themselves got big by making empty blockbusters. No offense, Star Wars. But so it seemed like real sour grapes. It seemed like they're just upset that they're not the ones making the billions of dollars anymore. Also, one thing I learned from the documentary on Spielberg, which I kind of already knew, was that Spielberg was kind of like part of a Brat Pack. It was like him and George Lucas and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and Brian De Palma and maybe one other person. They broke into Hollywood in an unprecedented way. They took over Hollywood, had complete control, and it had never happened before, and they made a killing. And it just sounds like they're upset that they're no longer making a killing. They're no longer taking over Hollywood. They got to make way for the younger people, which is exactly what they did when they were the younger people. And it's like the thief saying it's not fair when they get stolen from. I'm reminded of something a friend of mine once said about the Rolling Stones. He said, the fact that they're 70 years old and they're still trying to be the biggest band in the world is pathetic. Why not just pack it in and say, we had our time in the spotlight. Why don't we let some newer bands do it? And he said, this guy, Rick Ocasek, he actually did exactly that. He quit, he got out of the spotlight, and he ended up producing the Weezer albums. And that's pretty nice to let the other people have their chance. You're not the only big rock star on the planet. You're not the best. But it sounds like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, they still want to believe that they're just the most talented guys out there, and that it wasn't extremely lucky that they got where they were. Not that they weren't talented, but it was luck as well. It was incredible luck that got them where they are. They don't want to think that. They want to think that they're just magic. And so the magic's worn off, and it's a bitter, tough pill to swallow, right? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, you poor guy. Right, so Spielberg wants to make it harder for Netflix movies to be nominated for Oscars. Okay, so that's funny. He's obviously covering his own ass because he's involved in the Oscars and he wants to win more Oscars. Right, he doesn't want Joe the grocery store cashier to win an Oscar. I mean, if anybody can win an Oscar, then, what the hell is Hollywood going to do? They'll be screwed. And the thing is, that's only going to make the Oscars just as irrelevant as Steven Spielberg is. As if they're not already very irrelevant. I understand that the Oscars are a business and they have to watch their own asses, and I don't blame Spielberg for wanting to to make the Oscars more exclusive so that only the millionaires can do it and not Joe the grocery store cashier. But don't expect anybody to take you very seriously. And I mean, come on. You know how you win an Oscar. You have to actually spend tons of money on a press package to send to the Oscars. You got to send them flowers and candies and shit. You butter them up so that they'll like you. It's a kiss ass extravaganza, right? Let's not pretend this isn't the Nobel Prize awards. And you know what I always thought was funny about the Oscars, by the way, is that they'll give an Oscar to anybody. Somebody's got to win it every year. So what happens if there's a year where there's no good movies? Somebody's still going to win an Oscar. Whereas the Nobel Prizes, they only give them out if somebody deserved one. So if the whole year was all idiots, nobody wins a Nobel Prize. Adam Sandler could win an Oscar if there's no other movies that came out that year. And if he paid the Oscars lots of money and bought them lots of chocolates and took them out to dinner. So let's not pretend that the Oscars have standards. About 10 years ago, I was in a restaurant and I was bragging quite loudly about how I download all my stuff illegally, all my movies and everything. And then all of a sudden, I feel a hand on my shoulder from behind me, and some lady whispers in my ear, "Please don't download illegally. You'll put me out of work. You're keeping me from making a living." And I looked at her and I go, "Too bad." And she's like, "You know you're stealing, right?" And I just laughed at her. You know, you have become You've become obsolete because of technology. Well, boo-hoo, right? That happens to everybody. That's just how life works. How many people... I mean, that's like saying, you know, I used to ride a horse and buggy, and it's not fair that cars are putting us out of business. And, you know, nobody should drive cars because horse and buggies are better. They're not better. It's just that you acquired this skill that you spent a lot of years on, and now it's obsolete. And that's great that you were making way too much money because you got into the right field at the right time. But, you know, party's over, and now you got to make money, the same pitiful amount of money that the rest of us do, because your area of expertise is no longer in high demand. It can't always be like that. Welcome to life. Something like 15 years ago, George Lucas promoted this trailer, this advertisement that was in the movie theaters everywhere. And it was called something like, who makes money, who works for movies, who profits from movies. And then it shows like a stagehand or a key grip or just one of the background guys that does the props. And it plays this sad music, and the guy goes, "You know what? When you download music illegally, you're taking money out of my pocket. You're not hurting the producers. You're not hurting the millionaires. You're hurting me." And so I made a spoof of that, which I'm going to put right here at the end. You can no longer find the George Lucas thing because it's the most preposterous thing in the world. And I'm sorry, the stagehands and the key grips and the makeup artists, they don't lose money when you download movies. It's the billionaires. It's the producers. The stagehands and the key grips and the makeup artists, they do just fine. They'll always have work. It's no different than a billionaire saying, "You know, when you're not investing in my company and if you stop buying my products, it's not me that suffers. It's my maid and my butler." So here's the little video. I made a video. I made a mockery of the George Lucas thing around that time. It's about 10 years old. Here it is.
Movies have always been a real love of mine. When I was a kid, I worked as a paper boy. On Fridays when I got paid, me and my friends would go to the cinema. But as the years passed, movies got more and more expensive. I work really hard all day, 5, sometimes 6 days a week. I never complain. I know it's not a glamorous life, but I take pride in keeping the place looking respectable. You know, at the end of the week on my day off, I just want to relax and maybe go see a movie. But they charge so much now. It just takes all the pleasure out of it. Sell a candy bar or a box of popcorn for $5. I mean, it's just wrong. A lot of people put a lot of time, energy, and effort into making a decent living. But then some film company just comes along and says, hey, we want to reap all that benefit. It's just not right.
If you support gays, click like. If you respect blacks, comment. If you think women are people too, click the notification bell. And if you care about sick children, subscribe.